And I hope that rather than creating a sense of doom or overwhelm, that what this information might create is a sense of almost like a validation of something that has been intuited, an increased sense of clarity that makes the complexity of the challenge space at least start to feel tractable. And because if it is apprehendable, and if there are at least thought experiment-wise possible solutions, then there is a direction of endeavor. And to have more people feel that hopefulness that is not the naive hopefulness of not being aware of all these problems, but the hopefulness that comes on the other side of being aware of all of them and seeing what it would take to move through that and be oriented to that. That's what I hope comes of this. Thank you.
So that was a little baby clip from a film that Rebel Wisdom put out a little while ago called In Search of the Third Attractor. And it's about 4.5 hours long in total, spread out over 2 parts. And Daniel Schmachtenberger lays out a synthesis of a huge amount of work that he's done over the past few years. And it felt to me like it was a really, really important thing that he did there. And I'm well aware of the fact that most people are not going to sit down and watch 4.5 hours. And so I have felt called to make a sort of summary of it, but it's not actually intended to be a replacement, more of a primer. That's the idea of this, is that I can lay out some of the basic ideas that are in that, and then people, oh God, yeah, okay, I would like to know more about that, and then they go and watch the whole thing. That's the point of this. So it is not absolutely not intended to be a substitute. What he did is already a summary and a synthesis, and so he's gone out there and he's taken a whole bunch of work from a whole bunch of different people and he's brought it back together into one synthesis. I'm now taking that thing and bringing it down into a smaller synthesis, right? So what I'm going to do is lay out some of the terms and some of the basic ideas so that if and when you do go and watch it for yourself, you won't be hearing some of the stuff for the first time, right? You'll already have an inkling of some of the things that he's going to be talking about. So as I say, it's not a substitute. It's not like the man waffled and repeated himself over and over and over again. So yeah, please do at any point stop watching this and go and watch that instead. That's the point. The name of the video is In Search of the Third Attractor, and the Third Attractor is a way out of the Metacrisis. So I've prepared a few things here to help illustrate this. Okay, so here's a very, very simple diagram of what he calls the Metacrisis, or kind of anyway. And so just running through it very quickly. The exponential increase in technological capacity, right? So our leverage in the world, our ability to cause consequences in the world, right? To change the world around us, plus our inability to handle that technology wisely. So as it's got in red there, right? We're developing the power of gods without having the wisdom of gods with which to wield that power. And so the combination of those two things creates ever increasing potential for catastrophic risk in the culture. And so the third attractor, so that's the basic idea behind the Metacrisis. And the final leg of the Metacrisis, if you like, is this idea of the third attractor, that catastrophic risk is likely to result in one of two possibilities. And these are the two existing attractors. Possibility number one, catastrophic failure of some kind, or option number two, attractor number two. In order to avoid the risk, in order to bind the risk of that catastrophic failure, the only way is to control what everyone is doing all the time. Yeah, to know what everyone is doing all the time and to control it absolutely. And so neither of these being to most people very attractive options, that's what the video is about. What is a third attractor that is neither dystopian central control nor catastrophic failure, that allows us to wield the power of gods with the wisdom of gods, right? It allows us to wield the power of gods without destroying ourselves in the process. So that's the very basic idea. So like I said, I'm primarily here to try and explain some of the terms and ideas. And so firstly, this idea of exponential technology, what exactly does that mean? In the pink box, there are a few examples of the kinds of technologies that we're talking about, right? So our ability to extract and pollute, that's been going on for some time now. That's already reasonably mature. We're already pretty bloody good at that. Weaponry, similarly, right? Since the advent of nuclear weapons, our ability, our potential to cause catastrophic damage to the world, right? To potentially wipe ourselves and a huge amount of other things out with us. That's the first time we gained that ability, right? And we've had systems in place, mutual assured destruction and so on, which have stopped us from wielding it. But the possibility, the capacity remains. There's some others here which are relatively recent, right? Biotechnology and nanotechnology and artificial intelligence. These are all relatively recent ones. And so we look over, just jump over to the graph on the right-hand side, there's 4 different exponential curves there, right, with different levels of improvement year on year or period on period, whatever. Don't pay any attention to the scales. It doesn't matter. It's the shapes of the lines. And I put a big purple arrow on there saying that we are here, nowhere in particular, right? It's an arbitrary spot that I put it. But the point is, something like the black line, for example. If you look at the black line, that might be a reasonably good example of extraction and pollution, right? We've got gradually, better and better at that over time. And so, we might be well further along where my purple arrow is on the black line. It doesn't really matter. The point is that, that is steady year on year growth. But even then, the line gets steeper and steeper and steeper as time goes on, right? Like each improvement yields the possibility of more improvements. And so, and I've got a little stat down at the bottom there, like 10%, just 10% year on year improvement. 1 century of that is a 30,000-fold increase in capacity of that kind of thing. So if you look at the new ones, biotech, nanotech, AI, the green line might be a good representation of that, right? Like the green line is 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, and then all of a sudden, as soon as it starts to rise above 0, it goes to near vertical very, very quickly. And that's the thing with something like AI, right? Like you work on it, 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 you have the right breakthrough, and all of a sudden the thing explodes. And this is the kind of thing. So if we are roughly where my little purple arrow is there, right, we're just at the beginning of this thing exploding into growth. And what are the consequences of that? We do not know. And we're very, very bad at managing these kinds of unknown but potentially enormous risks. And that's one of the main points. Okay, so that's that. Let's move on. And so just going back to the original thing, so that's exponential technology. Add to that collective action failures. What do we mean by collective action failures? Well, I've just done a very few examples here, and I'm not going to go into these. I mean, Daniel does it, and I'm going to do it a little bit more in future videos. So the way this is going to work is I'm just going to go through the basic idea of the metacrisis here, and then in the next couple of videos, I want to sort of narrate a couple of stories around lead and around the plough, which will give contextual and well illustrated examples of some of these ideas again to embed them further, and then probably one final one on the third attractor itself, right? What might some of the characteristics of it be, or at least not be, right? Anyway, so collective action failures. There's a few examples there, right? Like with climate change and other environmental concerns, taking collective action around these things, especially at a global scale, we're terrible at, right? We come together, we make agreements, and then nobody holds up their end of the agreement. Polarization, right? The degree to which certain camps in the society can't talk to each other anymore. This is very, very dangerous and impossible to do collective action when that's the problem. So, I mean, all of these collective action examples have one thing in common, is that they are illustrations of our attempts to solve one thing or to make one thing better, actually create a whole bunch of bigger problems elsewhere. So, yeah, the polarization, for example, think of social media. Social media was meant to bring us closer together, to connect us to each other more effectively. What it's actually done is create tribes that cannot talk to each other. So this is the kind of thing. And then the underlying causes of all of these, and this is another one of the big themes of this video, is that even though there are 1,000 different crises, any one of which could be super serious, and how on earth do you deal with 1,000 different crises all at once? This is one of the hopeful messages to come out of these videos, is that despite the fact there are 1,000 different crises, they all have a few common underlying causes. And so if you can understand what those are, and then go about figuring out ways to manage those, then you get everything for free all at once, kind of thing. So that's the hopeful message underneath all this. So the underlying causes are multipolar traps. Multipolar traps is when there's no point one person doing anything because they lose if they do it. It's only if everybody does. Like nuclear weapons is a good example, right? Like it would be better for everybody if nobody had nuclear weapons. But if somebody has them, then other people also have to have them. Otherwise, they win. That one country that has nuclear weapons wins the game. And so now you're in a multipolar trap. Nobody can give up nuclear weapons unless everybody gives up nuclear weapons. But how do you know if everyone's given up nuclear weapons if you can't see inside their buildings and so on, right? And so this is the multipolar trap where collective action is blocked by the fact that everyone is looking after their own interests and can't see what everybody else is doing. Perverse incentives abound, right? We reward ruthlessness and rapaciousness and all of these negative qualities which are bad for the whole and yet are good for the individual, and so they're incentivized to do it. Lack of transparency, I've already mentioned, and the broken information ecology, right? What is true? What is a good source of unbiased information? We don't have these things anymore. And so all of these things are, these are the main underlying drivers of the collective action failures. These underlying dynamics make effective coordination at scale almost impossible. So these are the kinds of problems that we have to solve. So what are some of the catastrophic risks? Again, I'm not going to go into this in any detail here. I want to keep these videos really quite short and just give you the bare bones kind of thing. But these are some of the catastrophic risks that emerge from the combination of exponentially increasing technology and, one could argue, exponentially decreasing capacity for handling that technology. We seem to be getting more stupid and worse at coordination rather than better at it. So, there are hundreds, probably thousands. If you really wanted to, you could probably come up with millions of pathways to war and environmental, infrastructural, societal collapse. And the really bad ones, I mean, there are quite a few very plausible sounding pathways to obliteration, right, to extinction. These are existential risks, threats to our very existence. And like I say, some of them are really quite plausible. And so just going back to the original diagram, just to sum up for this video, once again, exponential technology plus collective action failures leads to the emergence of catastrophic risks. And these catastrophic risks are always getting worse, right? Like exponential technology does two things. First, the technology becomes more and more capable as time goes on, and it's more and more widely available, right? Nuclear weapons, only America had it, then America and Russia, and then China, and then the UK and France, and do you know what I mean? And then India and Pakistan. And this is the inevitable pathway, is that technology will not only improve and become better at whatever it is it's doing, but it will become more and more widely available, cheaper and cheaper to produce, etc., etc., etc. And so it's not impossible to imagine. It's already the case, in fact, that university biology genetics departments have these CRISPR machines, gene editing machines. And so in principle, any graduate student can go in there and print a new virus, right? And so the possibility of an accident or one bad actor being able to create catastrophic risk, this is constantly increasing, right? The possibility of this is constantly increasing. And so unless we figure out a way to manage that, we are headed for likely catastrophic failure, possibly even existential end. And if anyone can create a bioweapon in their university lab or a cyber weapon in their basement, then the only way to stop that catastrophic failure is for the authorities to know what everyone is doing in their basement, what every student is doing in every single biology department, everywhere, all the time, all at once, right? And so constant total surveillance, constant total breach of personal privacy and personal liberty. And so, these are the two existing attractors, and it's hard to see how we don't end up in one of these two attractive basins. So that's what the video is about. How can we figure out a way to not end up in one of these two places? All right, that's it for this one. Like I said, I'm going to do two more short-ish videos, one telling the story of lead in petrol and the consequences of that. And like I said, I want to weave some of these ideas into that in order to explore them and understand them more fully. And then the second one is on the adoption of the plow as a new technology. All right, thank you very much for listening. I hope you found this useful and informative. And like I said, at any time, you don't have to watch any of my other videos. I'm not doing this for my own self-aggrandizement. I just think it's really important that as many people as possible watch this, understand these ideas, because in doing so, there are more minds thinking about how can we get around some of these deeply entrenched problems and systemic dynamics that block us from making the world a better place. Okay, thanks again for listening. That's it for now. Bye.
What I hope makes it through is some sense that the various problems in the world have shared underlying drivers that, as deep and challenging as they may seem, are actually tractable. You can actually think about what the shared drivers are, and it moves it from the domain of impossible seeming to really hard, but maybe tractable. And hope that some frameworks for thinking about what is underneath and driving many of the enduring wicked problems and emerging catastrophic risks, that some frameworks for that are clear, and you can start thinking about those when you look at various problems in the world. And that maybe in addition to the frameworks we shared, the idea that there are probably quite a few more underlying characteristics that you can be thinking of, and that there might not be categorical solutions, but that there are progressively better solutions, I hope came across. That the catastrophes, regardless of which particular one, but the attractor of cascading catastrophes or control mechanisms that prevent it but create dystopias, create a framework for what we want to avoid. And that a third attractor that has the intelligence and regulatory power to avoid the catastrophes while having checks and balances on itself to be non-dystopic, that the creation of a world system that can do that should be the kind of central innovation goal of the world, of which everything is a element or a subsidiary part. And that more total collective intelligence and innovation and motivation being focused on these issues is worthwhile.